friend Brad Adams. Brad received his PhD in counseling psychology at USC and is currently working in cancer research at the UCLA Medical Center. He is the founder of the Los Angeles Medicinal Plant Society, or LAMPS, and was the chair of the Los Angeles Psychedelic Science Planning Committee, or LAPS, in 2018, and is again for LAPS 2020. It's going to be great. He collaborated with Drs. Charles Grove and Dennis McKenna on a pilot study titled Ayahuasca, Psychiatric Distress and the Meaning of Life, results from a pilot study in Peru. He is also in the early stages of setting up a global alliance of psychedelic research centers called the Global Psychedelic Alliance, as well as collaborating to set up an integral medicine conference in Asia that will include a module on psychedelic plant medicines. Please, a warm welcome to Brad Adams.
Thank you, everyone. First, I'd just like to thank Tom for setting this up, because as he mentioned, I was a major part in setting up the last conference, and it's a shit ton of work, and so kudos to you, Tom. I know you've learned a lot through this process, as have I, and I know the next one's just going to be better and better. So
we'll have audio worked out. Promise.
So, the title of my talk, The Dark Side of Psychedelics, Men Behaving Badly, What to Do About It. As you can see here, I have a Yin and Yang sign. For those of you who know, Yin and Yang is just the union of opposites. So, and there's a tendency in a new movement to highlight the positive aspects of things, which is good and the way things should be. Because right now, as we've heard so far all throughout this conference and through the last decade or so, a lot of great things have been going on. There's a great discoveries, and it's a very bright part of our world right now, because as you know, just watching the news, looking through your Facebook feed, there's a lot of problems in the world right now. And as Dennis McKenna would always say, that he has a lot of faith in plant medicine, because plant medicine is kind of a countercurrent to all the chaos and darkness going on right now, and is one of the things that I think can help save this planet. And with that being said, you can see how really precious this movement is and how we need to protect it. Because in the past, things have been shut down because of things getting a little out of hand. So that's kind of the emphasis of this talk. And so I'm going to be giving you a little bit of information about some of the things going bad in the community, and some of my ideas and other people's ideas on how to address this. And then I want to open it up at the end for your input. Just get because you're part of the community. We need to get community involvement for all this, because we all have collective ownership in this movement. It's not just in the hands of a handful of people, because everyone who has a vested interest in this has a vested interest in seeing it come through and be safeguarded. So, I hope you can see that okay. But first of all, I just want to give a little bit of information. So I started the Los Angeles Medicinal Plant Society about 3 years ago. We have meetings the first Sunday of every month. If anyone wants to get on this list, we have a Facebook group and an email group. So I have a sign-up sheet here. You can sign up and become part of those. And if you're ever in LA on the first Sunday, feel free to stop in and check out the speakers. We've had Dennis McKenna. We had some pretty big speakers and great things in the past. So and coming up, we have a lot more great things. In fact, the last two meetings we had were based just on this very topic of problems in the community and how to deal with it. So this is kind of a continuation of that. And also a plug for the Los Angeles Psychedelic Science Symposium. We had a great showing last time, and it was a great success despite a lot of challenges and hurdles to overcome. But and again, I want to encourage people who are inspired by this and these kind of conferences. If you want to try to set something up yourself, either a group, a local group, if there's not one in your area, or if you want to try to get little conferences or guest speakers, I encourage you to do that. It's a lot more fun than you think it is. It's not quite as hard as you think it is. I mean, it can be, depending on the scope of it, of course, but it's things like this at local levels that really make a big difference. So I just want to give a shout out to that.
It was a great conference.
Thank you. And I know you can't read this, but this is if anyone wants to check out the conference, go to laps.org, lapss.org. You can see the speaker lineup. everything that went on last time. This is the speaker lineup, the schedule, and I'm so proud of what we were able to accomplish because we got Dennis McKenna, Devon Mate, James Fadiman, we got huge, big names, and this next time we're going to try to get people we didn't get last time, like Stan Groff, try to get him to be the keynote speaker, Michael Pollan, and so forth, people who were there last time. So stay tuned for that. We're also going to have send out something for volunteers if you want to participate in the creation and implementation of the conference. Last time it was all a volunteer basis, and this time it's going to be largely volunteer as well. So feel free to sign up for that. And we'll have different tiers of volunteerism. So people who just want to volunteer during the day of the conference to help set up or run like sell books or something like that, you'll get free entry into the conference. And then on up, if you do bigger projects, then we'll work out ways of maybe bigger compensation packages. But if anyone's interested in that kind of thing, stay tuned for that, and please fill out the application for that. For the more important roles, we will be wanting to see resumes and get interviews and stuff to vet people. But
do you have a date for that?
we're looking at the end of July 2020, so a year from now, which would be a lot better because last time we would try to rush and get everything done in 6 months, and it was a lot of stress, as I'm sure you can. And Ticketmaster didn't get tickets on sale until like 6 weeks before the venue, so this time we're going to hope for, and we're not going to use Ticketmaster for sure, because they suck. I might just give a little orientation. I gave a talk one time at Ashland about the Buddhist will of life, and I think it's kind of a neat orientation. If you know, I'm not going to go too much into this, but if anyone's interested in relating psychedelics to Buddhism or this type of thing, check out MAPS, the MAPS keynote address, the last one by Stan Groff. He did talk about a little bit, especially the middle of the Wheel of Life. Anyone familiar with this? Seen it or studied it at all? Okay. If you ever go to Tibet, it's in front of every temple. It's like a reminder of you're stuck on the wheel of samsara, and your job is to get off of it. And but there's a lot of things to do to get off of it. I'm not going to go into too much of that, but I will talk a little bit about some of the other key components of it. So this is at the center of the wheel, and the thing that keeps us stuck on the wheel are what they call the three poisons, represented by a pig, usually a rooster or a different type of bird, and a snake. And as you can see, they're all biting each other's tails, so they're all interrelated. They all support each other in terms of keeping us stuck on the wheel. The pig represents ignorance or delusion, so that's not just ignorance of like knowledge, like but not being educated, but it's ignorance of our true nature. So our nature as the spiritual nature or the nature of emptiness, or however you want to look at it. But in terms of Buddhism or Hinduism or Christianity, there's different ways of conceptualizing this. But it's primarily just believing that we're the ego, we're the smaller self, and acting out of that. And all you have to do is look at the news, and you can see this writ large at a world level, because a lot of our world leaders right now are stuck in ego, they're stuck in a lot of this negativity and darkness. And that's why I'm really excited about psychedelics, because psychedelics are a way of bringing us to our true identity and waking us up to who we truly are. And if we knew who we truly were, we would not act in ways that we see our government acting right now, because it's a mess. So the snake represents hatred or aversion. And I don't think I need to talk too much about that. That also kind of stems from our ignorance. We hate people, we're angry at people, we tend to polarize and see people as the enemy based on this anger or aversion. And the peacock or rooster, or whatever, the bird represents greed or lust or those types of things. So if you look at it, the snake is aversion, it's pushing things away. The bird is bringing attraction or bringing things towards you in a negative way, and the pig is ignorance. And just real quickly, it's kind of interesting that the outer ring you see here there's a light ring and a dark ring. So try to find which path you're on right now, because it makes a big difference in where you are in terms of the rest of samsara. Because the dark path is what we can imagine, just greed, hatred, and ignorance, just feeding those negative tendencies. And darkness leads to darkness leads to darkness. So it's a way of just perpetuating that you on that path, and you will suffer for it. It's not a good path to be on. The light path, on the other hand, is when people start developing an interest in a different dimension other than their small ego. So a spiritual dimension, a dimension, an attitude of wanting to wake up, wanting to make a difference, thinking outside of yourself, thinking in terms of like a bigger community, and just getting out of our selfish ego. Because that's many religions say that that's the cause of all suffering is identification with the smaller self. Because if you think you're the small self and you have this mentality that there's not enough to go around, then you're going to be grabbing for all you can, you're going to be stepping on people, you're going to be doing all these negative things just to accumulate these material objects. And it's delusion. It's the wrong path, and it's going to lead you to negative things, and it's for your own personal life as well as people around you. So I want to switch a little bit now to the Yin Yang symbol, and again, it's a union of opposites. So, and I want to stress that the dark part or the Yin aspects are not necessarily bad. It's all part of the totality. So in a way, you can see that it's good all in totality. But in this circumstance, I'm going to talk about it more in terms of for this talk the negative aspects of the movement. And the things I'm going to talk about a little bit are not necessarily negative in themselves, but the way they're used and the way people have a relation to it is what causes the suffering. So the yin factors. So first of all, money. So whenever you get a new movement or any new thing coming along where there's a lot of interest and a lot of potential power and money, you're going to have a lot of different people attracted to that. And you're going to have good people attracted to it with a good relationship with money, thinking they're going to draw money in and channel it for something good. And you can see that in terms of, there's a lot of billionaires who are very philanthropic, and they use their money for good. And then you see a lot of people who are just the opposite end of the spectrum, that their whole life is revolved around accumulating more and more and to help everyone else. And the current administration, I see that in a lot of ways. It's just greed-driven, it's all grab as much as you can and to help with everyone else. Same thing with power. A lot of negative people or people on the wrong path, the dark path, are attracted to power. There's a famous saying by Jungian, who was in existential psychology, said if you can't get love, you go for power. So a lot of people behaving badly, if you think about it that way, you can have almost a sense of compassion for them as well, because these are wounded people. Healthy people who have plenty of love in their childhood and good, all the good things in life, rarely go down that dark path. Some people do still, but the chances are a lot less likely if you get what you need. So a lot of people go for power because that's all they think they can get, and they're very wounded, and that's what they scramble for. There's incompetent or poorly trained practitioners. And again, this is neither good nor bad. It just is. We have a huge need in this community. But if you look at where things are going, like at MAPS, huge progress and great things are happening. But it seems to be happening too slowly for a lot of people, including me. And you just heard the talk about 22 bets a day, killing themselves. So it's the first MAPS conference I went to. The very first talk I sat in on was the MDMA talk for PTSD, and I was just blown away by the results. It was just like nothing short of miraculous. And if you haven't seen those data, I highly recommend go on maps.org and look at the data, because nothing else has effect sizes of that magnitude. Prozac, no pharmaceutical comes close, no fancy therapy. Psychedelics are the only thing, or especially MDMA, is the only thing that has this huge curative power to get people to minimize their PTSD symptoms so that they no longer qualify for PTSD diagnosis, which is, nothing else comes close to that. It's just nothing short of a godsend. So, and then lastly, we have malevolent practitioners. These are people who, I'll talk about a little bit later, who know they're doing bad. They're not just incompetent or whatever, but they're in it for all the wrong reasons, or it might even be mixed reasons. They might have, part of them might really want to help people, but there's also another part that are more interested in the money and the control of people and taking advantage of people. So, and we need to be cognizant of all this. Some of us, including myself, I find myself have a tendency to be a little Pollyannish and hide head in the sand, especially when things are going so bad. I understand why people are afraid to look at the news or don't even want to look at the news because it's so depressing and negative, but hiding our heads in the sand is not going to make things better. And there comes a time where we need to actually stand up and take a stand and make things better. At least that's my point of view.
Yeah.
So, and I wish you could see this better, but these are kind of examples of the shadow aspect. In Jungian psychology, the shadow is the parts of ourselves in which we don't like. So we all have shadows, but we project them onto other people. And Trump's a great example. He's a lot of flaws and everything, but he's just such a great Rorschach blot because people project all sorts of things onto him, and it's just a natural human thing to do. But the way we can really grow is to realize that we can see the shadow and the negativity in other people, but we also need to realize we have it in ourselves, and that's a very humbling thing. If I have a little time, I can share a very interesting ayahuasca journey I had where I came face to face with my shadow in that way, which is kind of horrifying in one way, but also very humbling. So if you can't see, these are some people from Game of Thrones, Lord of the Rings. Gollum, I think, is a great representation of the shadow. Just this greedy, wounded part. And all of us have this little greedy, wounded part to us. When we're babies, we're very self-centered. The world revolves around us. And most people tend to grow out of that. Some people don't. I hope you can read this, but we do not want to repeat history. And for those of us old enough to, I see most of us aren't, but so I'll just, a little history lesson. Some people are old enough. So back in the 60s, it was a renaissance in a way. We had the Vietnam War raging. There's all sorts of disillusionment with with status quo reality. And psychedelics played a really pivotal role in waking people up and to saying, well, maybe this isn't reality. Maybe the things our parents were telling us aren't all completely true. Maybe we don't need to support this war, which we see doesn't seem like a just war. And so there was a lot of enthusiasm and fervor about this. And Timothy Leary was one of the main spearheads of this. And unfortunately, I think he's vilified a little too much for this because they tend to pin the tail on the donkey for Tim. But there's a lot of other factors with it. But he did play a pivotal role. He was one of the main, more visible factors in this. And of course, when Nixon came in around 1970 and put the kibosh on it all, and called the drugs and Leary, public enemy number one, and the scourge and everything. So everything was shut down, and all psychedelics were put on Schedule 1, despite the fact that in the 50s and 60s there was tons of excellent research going on. Tons of amazing findings that now is being picked up in the 90s and so forth again. But people don't realize that there was a lot of research with LSD, with alcoholism and addiction. Stan Groff wrote this huge book on LSD psychotherapy. He's did LSD psychotherapy with hundreds and hundreds of people, including Cary Grant, who was one of the biggest cheerleaders. So it was a big thing, and people don't seem to realize that it was a big thing. But Nixon and the cronies tend to come in with their waves of fear, and it seemed to wipe out memory of all this kind of thing. So we just need to remember that the seeds were planted a long time ago, and it was shut down because of these fearful influences. And we do not want that to happen again. So we need to be very vigilant in terms of what we do and how we represent ourselves, because especially with people like Jeff Sessions and Trump and people who are very fearful and controlling. I can envision something similar happening. I think now, if it happened now, there would be a lot more backlash and there'd be a lot more tumult as a result of it. But let's do all we can right now to safeguard the movement, because the Renaissance is not in its infancy anymore. It's kind of in its toddlerhood or adolescence, whatever I think about it, but it still needs our protection and guidance. So I want to first talk about this above ground versus underground practices. So above ground practices include things like MAPS, So MAPS has FDA approval and DEA approval and all approvals from the government to do this kind of research. And they're doing great things, again, with FDA research. I didn't mention Beckley and Hector, but there's psilocybin research across the pond in Beckley. They're doing MRI research. So there's just a lot of great stuff going on. And they have protocols in place for how to deal with people who go outside the ethical boundaries. And the same thing with the legal use of, like, say, ayahuasca. I put the Temple of the Way of Light as just one example. I think that there's one of the few, or one of several, I should say, retreats that have, as far as I know, still a good reputation. Some of them have fallen into ill repute because of bad shamans and so forth. But and I'm not familiar with their practices, but that's one thing I want to do is reach out to both MAPS and places like that to see what do they do. So we don't have to recreate the wheel. We can use whatever protocols are in place that seem to be helpful. And also just in terms of regular medical practice and psychological practice, there are great things in place for how to deal with people who breach confidentiality, or breach the principles they're supposed to be adhering to. And then we have the underground, or I would say not yet legal movement. And these are people, the brave psychonauts and people who are risking backlash from the government by providing these healing services to people. So this is, I don't want to say anything negative about this movement because it's well, I'll say some negative things about the practitioners, but the movement itself is very good. And it's people, if people have PTSD and they want to get into MAPS protocol, they want to do that, they're on a long waiting list. There's just simply not enough resources to help all these people. So this, the underground movement is a great way to deal with that. But there's a lot of problems inherently with it, as you can tell, because there's no standards of practice, there's no real protocol for how to guide this process. And so a lot of these practices include LSD. Like I said, the LSD psychotherapy, some people are sitting for that. Some people, and it runs the whole gamut from a friend. You can say, hey, I'm gonna sit with LSD and deal with my issues. Do you mind just sitting with me, making sure I don't do anything stupid or get into problems? You can help me get out. And the friend may or may not have any training with that. And that's a fine thing if you know that what you're getting into, both of you. Because for any of you who've ever sat with anyone and things got a little hairy, it can be very scary, and you want to make sure that you know what you're getting into. Because it's not all puppy dogs and roses and unicorns. Ayahuasca, there's I heard the stat that you can go in like certain parts of LA, you can throw a baseball and probably hit an ayahuasca ceremony because they're ubiquitous, they're all over the place. The good news is that the government, so far, the DEA doesn't seem to be cracking down on these a lot. And what I heard is that they're turning a little bit of a blind eye because there's really not a lot of money in it. Like if they know that someone's selling crack or something like that. Oh my God, okay. I'm going to skip over a lot of this. But there's every entheogen you can think of, there's someone doing work with it underground. Now, recent events, how many of you have seen this open letter about Octavio, Rettig, and Gerry Sandoval? And how many have signed it? Okay. I highly recommend for those of you who haven't to check it out. It's at 5-neo-dmt-malpractice.org. And it's a very long letter. When I was first approached with this, someone said they were drafting this or with some other people, and would I sign it? And I was a little bit wary about doing it. I know both of these men. I didn't want to do anything to possibly harm them in any way. But when I saw this and I saw all the malpractices and all the dangerous practices that they're involved in, I thought, yeah, we need to do something about this. Because, as Tom mentioned, there's a lot of, Octavio is very open about this. YouTube's showing him tasing people, waterboarding people, kicking someone in the nuts. And, has anyone taken 5-MeO-DMT?
Yeah.
Would you want to be kicked in the nuts when you're on 5-MeO-DMT?
I want to be kicked in the nuts even when I'm not.
And that's perfectly fine, but there's something called informed consent, which is very sacred in medicine and psychology. If you go in, you say, hey, I am stuck. I like a Zen Roshi, like I might need a whack with a stick, to jar me out of that. So if you can kick me in the nuts while I'm in the midst of it, please do. That's fine. I have no problem with that. But to do that with someone who hasn't consented to that, doesn't expect that, that's a huge ethical violation, and that shit needs to stop because that's
How long
dangerous.
has that been going on?
3 years.
Quite a while. Check out YouTube and just type in his name, or go, better yet, check out this letter, because there's all these things most of them are posted, along with a list of their, and here's just these are summaries, just to give you kind of an idea. I'm not going to go too much into this, but so a brief list of reported malpractices by Octavio include dangerous sessions leading to hospitalizations and deaths, psychological and physical violence, non-consensual interventions, and that includes blowing hape up someone's nose, despite the fact that they say no, 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 he still did it, which is horrifying to watch. Let's see, psychological and physical violence, non-consensual interventions, and abuses of power and neglect of people who have been damaged. Another example not mentioned here, he administered 5-MeO to 80 people, and I think he only had a couple of helpers. There's no way you can administer to 80 people, and some people are going to have a lot of problems with that. How the hell are you going to go back and make sure they're okay with that? It's impossible. It's reckless, it's dangerous, and it's not good practices. A brief history of reported malpractices by Gerry include rape, clandestine drugging, planting drugs on other people with intent to endanger them, like at airports, you're planting drugs on people to help them not get caught. Grossly unsafe serving practices, overdosing people on purpose, that sort of thing. Psychological manipulation and financial fraud. He set up this whole thing trying to protect the toad because of dwindling toad populations, and he just pocketed all the money. So, we're a very trusting community, and we all want things to go well, but we have to know that there's people out here that don't have the good intentions of the community in mind. And I'm not going to read this, and obviously you can't either. But this is from the conference in Mexico, the World Various Conference, and they actually came out with a statement against Octavio. So this is really heartening to see the community come together and spread this information. When this letter came out, I immediately signed it. I spread it to every place I could think of, and I encourage other people to do that because we need to get the word out. But stuff like this is encouraging, but we need to come up with better protocols because we can't just do this every single time something bad happens. And this came to a point where things had to get so bad, as you saw, the whole litany of bad things that had to get bad enough to do this. And we don't want to let things get that bad, so we need to nip this at the bud a little bit. Come up with a better system where people can come and talk to someone if they've been harmed by someone or felt they've been someone's doing some malpractice, and talk to them and see what we can do. Some just quick key points. But we don't want this to devolve into an inquisition or witch hunt type thing. And it's very important to have a principle of compassion with this, not only for the victims but also for the perpetrator, because I think a lot of them, maybe not, I don't know about the two I've just talked about, but some people might appreciate the fact to get back into good standing. It doesn't feel comfortable at a soul level to do these practices, and for anyone who's been on a dark path, your inner compass tells you, you're not doing something good. So to give people a path of redemption is one of the most compassionate things we can do. It should be a multi-step process, like I said. Concentric circles, I won't go into what we can do. So quick things, what we can do is we can read inside the letter. We can join in discussion groups, like at Labs. Portland has a lot of good groups here as well, psychedelic groups. Just discuss this. Come out in the open and just bring it out in the open, because we can't keep this hidden or secretive or just to ourselves. It needs to come out in the open, and we need to discuss it and find out what to do with it. Okay. So real quickly, and again, we don't want to create the wheel with this. There are people doing great work with this, including the Conclave, which is based on 5-MeO, DMT, but there's also other groups who are working towards this. So again, a lot of part of this is finding the others. What do you do? Let's compare notes, and then take the best from all these practices and develop the best practice we can do. See if we can get consensus in the wider community as well as the smaller communities. Form links between these smaller communities. So it's a network. It's a network we can share information. So say if another Octavio or Dr. Gerry example comes up, we'll have a place where we can have someone talk about it. We're going to form a council of elders so we'll form an ombudsman, or so a person can come talk to the ombudsman, do a little mediation with the practitioner if they're open to it, and see if they can solve the problem that way, not escalate it anywhere. If that doesn't work, then there'll be different layers of places where we can escalate this all the way to where we just put out the word where blacklist these people and say, stay away type thing, which is the most radical thing and what we'd like to avoid, but we need to have that in our bag of tricks in order to safeguard the community. I'm not going to read all this, and since we're out of time, this is I have a couple of examples. This is from best practices, 5-MeO-DMT. It's just really well done from the conclave. And I have a couple, just 2 copies I can give away. Maybe I'll give you one to you, Tom. You can post it somewhere.
Absolutely.
You can download it. There's a website here, www.awareproject.org, which is
What is it?
Oh, it's aware.
Aware Project. So it's www.awareproject.org. And you can see this whole, it's a nice, very nice long guide which tells you how to pick a practitioner, how to prepare, what to do when things go wrong, and so forth. So I really want to work with groups like the Conclave to develop these things. I've been in dialogue with a couple of people, and so I'm really excited about this. I had a couple, like I said, a couple of discussions at my own group, the LAMPS project, or LAMPS group, and a lot of great information has come out, and the bottom line is that we do need to form these councils, and these people should be well vetted, people who know their stuff, so if things get escalated, it can come up and say, okay, what do we do about this? And the way I envision it, and I want to, I was hoping to have more time to have question and answer and speak your input, but I'd like to see something where it's both regional, like so LA will have our own council and where people can go to and talk about this. Portland, you have your own, but we could also have a bigger council for like stuff if you notice things going on in a variety of communities. We think this is a bigger thing than just the LA community or Portland. This could be escalated into something bigger where we talk about it more first, at a country level, and then maybe even at the global level. So, Al?
2 minutes.
One question. Do you have a question?
It's not a question, I just wanted to, when you were talking about the MDMA studies and how wonderful the medicine is, which it is, but I want to say that for people that might not be aware of how it works, is that all of these medications are in conjunction with counseling. That counseling is not just the medicine.
That's a great point. For those of you yesterday, were you here yesterday? Yeah, someone discussed that in depth. But that's an excellent point. You can't just go to a rave and take MDMA. Well, you can. Some people do get great healing from that, and I don't want to knock that too much. But again, this is like for the MAPS protocols, 15 sessions. Most of those were without the medicine. So this is MDMA-assisted therapy, which is an excellent point. Which begs the question, underlines the point of how important it is to get guidance for integration as well as guidance during the ceremony and so forth. Because if you just take this stuff on yourself, you can get certain gains from it. But nothing beats having a well-educated. If you want to take a trip, say if you want to go to Mexico and you want to navigate somewhere, who are you going to ask? You can ask someone who's maybe read about it or whatever. You don't want to ask someone who's actually been there and done the path several times. Obviously, you want to have an expert who knows the territory. So same thing with this. This is even more important. You want an educated psychonaut who knows how to deal. Like, if you get near the cliffs and you get in danger, how to get out of that danger. So, thank you for doing that. I think I'm out of time. So, thank you very much. If you're interested in the information, please sign up and I'll put it on my list.